Your brain is an efficiency engine designed to survive a flood of daily data. To conserve energy, it identifies routines and switches into cognitive autopilot. Once a behavior is automated, the brain stops spending resources to process it. It actively prunes neural connections associated with these familiar, unneeded steps, allowing you to move through your day while barely noticing your surroundings. This stands in stark contrast to the effort required to build internal knowledge. When London taxi drivers spend years manually tracing thousands of streets, they physically increase the density of their hippocampus, the brain's spatial memory center. Relying on automated, frictionless tools like GPS completely removes this cognitive demand. Without the struggle to orient yourself, the brain stops building internal maps, and its memory centers begin to weaken. This ruthless efficiency means your brain is constantly deleting your mundane present. It treats the predictable as disposable, saving its energy for high-stakes survival. Instead of the routine, the brain records novelty and cognitive disruption. It prioritizes emotional peaks, moments that represent significant deviations from the norm. From an evolutionary perspective, these peaks contain the vital data needed to form an identity and keep us alive. They signal when the environment has changed in a way that requires a new response. This autopilot mechanism can be devastating to a relationship. Through hedonic adaptation, the brain adjusts to a partner's presence until it becomes a baseline expectation. Eventually, we stop processing the other person entirely. The brain reclassifies a once novel connection into a mundane routine. As the relationship becomes predictable, we ignore a partner's daily contributions because they no longer trigger a peak response. This apathetic state shatters a partner's sense of competence. Their evolutionary drive to be essential to the unit's survival is neglected, making them feel unnecessary and emotionally isolated. What feels like a comfortable routine is often the sound of a fading connection. The brain is effectively deleting the emotional core of the relationship to save energy. The brain processes a disconnect from a primary attachment figure as an existential survival threat. When you feel a partner pulling away, your neurobiology reacts as if your physical safety is at stake. The amygdala, the brain's threat detector, activates the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. This triggers a cascading flow of cortisol and adrenaline, forcing the body into a state of high alert. Chronic sympathetic arousal leads to systemic inflammation and compromised immune function. Over time, this biological stress response increases the risk of cardiovascular events and disrupts the body's ability to repair itself. Superficial fixes like aesthetic changes or manipulative games fail because they ignore this evolutionary biology. They don't address the underlying alarm, telling the brain it is losing its primary support system. A failing relationship is a physiological attack on the body's health. It subjects your anatomy to a sustained state of emergency that degrades your long-term well-being. De-escalating this biological alarm requires restoring the partner's perceived evolutionary status. By providing specific validation of competence, you resolve the internal crisis of being unneeded or obsolete. Shifting communication to show you uniquely rely on them creates a synthetic opportunity for evolutionary success. It proves their role is vital, which directly counters the brain's fear of exclusion. This genuine validation triggers the dopaminergic reward system. When the brain receives proof of its own competence and value, it releases a surge of dopamine and oxytocin, the neurochemicals of pair bonding. This neurochemical shift bypasses defensive barriers. It immediately begins downregulating the amygdala, signaling that the threat has passed and allowing the partner to return to a baseline state of safety. Targeted validation is a biological hack. It is the most effective tool for manually shutting off the brain's threat detection system and restoring cognitive balance. Changing these communication patterns requires neuroplasticity, the physical rewiring of established neural pathways. Overriding your default defensive reactions takes immense, exhausting cognitive effort. New validation signals initially cause cognitive friction. Because these behaviors disrupt the established predictable dynamic, both partners may experience a period of discomfort or suspicion. This friction is part of the process and typically lasts for the first 14 days. You must push through the unnatural feeling of this new communication style before the brain can adapt to the change. During the thawing period in weeks 3 to 6, the partner's breath detector finally powers down. The brain realizes the new behavior is consistent and safe, allowing spontaneous acts of affection to return. Repairing a relationship is a structural neurochemical rebuild. It is a long-term project that cannot be accomplished over a single weekend. Through sustained distributed practice, the brain achieves secure attachment integration. The new habits become the default, creating a resilient emotional bond. Consistently deploying validation forces the brain to classify the relationship as a vital, permanent peak. It prevents the connection from fading back into a mundane routine that the brain is programmed to delete. By refusing to let our interactions become mundane, we harness our evolutionary programming to build a healthier, resilient identity. We ensure that our most important connections are never optimized out of our lives.